once we get past September, we switch to hearing from the Gospel of St. Luke. And we continue in these readings basically up until that. There's some things that happen during the Nativity that are a little different. But essentially, we're hearing from the Gospel of St. Luke as we move in this direction. So that's a little thing especially for the kids in church schools. I know you're studying the Gospel stories this fall. So you're going to be looking at Luke here. Well, the reading that we just heard is actually the second of the ones from the Gospel of Luke. Last week was a feast day for St. John the Theologian, so we read from his Gospel. So what we're reading now is at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, his public ministry. He has just called the 12 to be his apostles. And this is from a sermon that he is offering. It's kind of a shorter sermon. We're more familiar in the Gospel of Matthew with the Sermon on the Mount, which runs for about 3 chapters. This one runs for about half a chapter. It has similar content. But it's this discussion about who we love. And Jesus makes this point that it is very easy for us to be comfortable with our default, which is, well, we love those who love us. We love our family members, we love our friends, the people that we're familiar with and comfortable with. But he makes this point that it is not enough to love in that respect. He talks about other things like, who do you lend money to? Well, do you just lend to people who you expect will lend money back to you? It's the same sort of thing. He's saying we have to look past that. And he takes it even further and says, we have to love our enemies. I don't know if we, in our lives, have enemies. It's not like we personally have warfare. But there are people in our lives where there's friction. We don't get along with everybody. We don't necessarily like everybody. There are people in our lives that may rub us the wrong way. And what Jesus is telling us is that those people are people we need to love. Well, in saying that, and of course in the language of this, and the easy homily to offer on this, is to just offer it as a moral thing. It's the right thing to do. It's a good thing to love your enemy. It's a bad thing not to love your enemy. Do the good thing, don't do the bad thing. And we can leave it at the moral principle. But it's actually far more detailed and important than that for us. A lot of what we have been given in terms of our morality and what we are to do really speaks more to our individual role as bearers of Christ. We've been given the job of sharing the love of God for those who are not those that we would normally share with. And we can often get stuck on this thing about, well, everyone needs to come into the church and be part of the church and just be here. And that's kind of the focal point. The thing that we need to keep in mind is that God came and that Jesus Christ's death on the cross was for everyone. Even those who aren't here. Even those who might never even darken the door of the church. And the only way that those folks will know about the love of God is that if they see it in us. We're essentially ambassadors, as it were, of sharing that light. An image that we're all familiar with. We come for the Pascha service, and it's a dark church. And then, fairly early on, I come out with a candle. Come receive the light. And it's that celebration of Christ being risen from the dead. And then I walk through the middle of the church, and I kind of go back and forth. Everybody lights their candles. And soon the whole church is illumined with light. So we receive that light. We bear that light. Now, of course, in the Pascha liturgy, we go outside, come to the door, turn all the lights on the church, and then when we come back and we blow our candles out. Of course, there's the venerable custom that a lot of Orthodox do is they'll get one of those votive candles in the glass like this. And they'll put the light in there, and they'll take it home. And they'll try and keep that candle lit as long as they can. That points at this idea. The light we receive here and then we take out, we don't just take it home and put it on a shelf and keep it there. But it's that act of taking the light from here out into the world. So Jesus makes this point. It's no thing for us to just love each other and leave it there, or to lend to others and leave it there. Because bad people do that. There's the whole thing about honor among thieves, as it were. Thieves take care of each other, but they're bad people. So it's going beyond that. Well, how do we go about doing that sort of thing? Bearing our light to others. So I know in a sense it's like saying, well, I'm going to go down to the end of my driveway, but I have to leave my property, the place where I feel comfortable and safe, and I have to go out and take this somewhere. I'll just share something that is something to dwell on. It's not like it's not like a checklist. Here's what you do. Go and do this. So this relates to a different gospel story. I'll look at this real quick. This came to mind when I was preparing this homily. So it reminded me of the Gospel of Matthew. It's at a similar time from what we just heard in our reading. So it was early in Jesus' public ministry. He had gathered the 12 together and appointed them as the apostles. And early in that, he gave them a job. He said, go out in groups by 2 and go kind of visit all the towns and villages around here and share what's happening. And in doing that, he gave them advice. And so the one that stood out for me in that advice, let's see. This should sound familiar. This talks to our comfort. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. I know and understand that the task of having to love those that you don't necessarily get along with, who might be your enemies, put you in a vulnerable position. That's what Jesus is saying here. It's not going to be safe in that regard. You are putting yourself out there in that respect. But that doesn't mean that you go out and you're just exposed. I love you, I love you, I love you. And you accept whatever happens from that person. It's still saying that it's incumbent upon you to go out there, to be the dove in innocence. He says, be wise as serpents. You have to measure and understand who you're talking to and how you're loving them and how it might be received and how it might not be received. You can still be pleasant and wish the best for someone and pray for them, even if they don't want to hear it. But you don't put it in their face. You have to have the discernment. So that's the picture that we have here. We have to get past the driveway. We have to leave the church on Pascha, but take the candle with us. And then we have to use that discernment. How do we show that candle to others? So that they can know that God loves them. That's the whole point of that. So, we're given this lesson by Jesus. It's not a basic moralism, as I said. It's not just do this to do the right thing. Don't do it because it's the bad thing. It's not a simple moralism. It is because we have a responsibility. Because we've received this love from God. And God has said that that love is available to all those that are out there. It's to just share it with them. But we use that discernment, the wisdom of the serpent, so that we can be innocent as a dove. Glory to Jesus Christ.